Episode 30 of Ascendance of Bookworm is out, and quite an episode. A lot more action-packed than it typically is. Really does seem like things are still continuing to ramp up, though not in the direction I was kind of hoping for with the previous episode. It really does seem like things are getting serious. Things are really going in a direction where, again, we can't ignore this issue anymore. At some point, something's got to give. And while my prediction around Sylvester seemed to be true, I kind of felt like he was going to be the one that would really poke and prod at Myne. Didn't last for very long. He ended up pushing the buttons that he wasn't supposed to push, and it just set her off. So we quickly kind of squished that out. Now, granted, Sylvester could still continue to tease at Myne. He seems to be a very interesting character. as Ferdinand puts it, he's a very unsavory character, somebody that's really loves to mess around, and he's very interesting in that regard. But like I said, didn't last very long before he pushed the wrong buttons. Maybe he'll find the boundaries and we can kind of stick in that area. Like I said, I kind of want somebody that can kind of poke at Myne and really get at her to bring out that goofiness. Because, like, obviously with the very first scene, that was a lot of fun until it wasn't fun. Before I move on, I meant to put this at the very beginning, but it seems like there's confusions in the comment sections regarding who I'm referring to as High Priest or Head Priest and whatnot. I will always go by the Crunchyroll translation. I'm sorry that they translate it differently than the light novel. If you read the light novel and they call him Bishop or whatever, I'm calling him High Priest because Crunchyroll's calling him High Priest. My videos are for, yes, light novel readers. I'm perfectly fine for you guys enjoying these videos, and I'm happy that you guys have been enjoying these videos. I love the feedback. I've always enjoyed whenever people check out the source material and then come and watch my videos. And yes, there's issues they see with the translation from the source material, but it is what it is. The light novel has different translators than the anime. It's a common thing in anime and source material. It's always going to be that way. It's not really something that's going to change. I don't think there's probably any examples where they use the same translator for both. They're hired differently. And so they're going to translate things differently. They're going to stick to a certain format. And so me, being somebody that's watching the anime only right now, I have actually requested review copies of the light novel. Hopefully that'll go through. So if you're from J Novel Club watching this video, put in a good word for me. But yes, I'm doing impressions on the anime. And the anime was translated as Evil Santa Guy, as somebody put it, is the High Priest. I don't ever call Ferdinand Head Priest. I always call him Ferdinand. He's just Ferdinand to me. So you're going to hear Ferdinand, that's the head priest, according to the translator of the anime, and Evil Santa Guy is High Priest. I've never changed that. It's always been that way, and that's what I'll be going forward. So if you hear High Priest, it's Evil Santa. If you hear Ferdinand, that's the head priest. It's the same thing. So anyways, now that's out of the way. So after Sylvester is introduced, and he successfully teases Myne to the point where she's about to kill him, yes, Ferdinand kind of points out that, yeah, this guy's unsavory, just kind of humor him. We have to deal with him kind of thing. Which is interesting. That was an interesting thing that Ferdinand was willing to bring Sylvester along, despite the fact that it seems like he doesn't really care for him. He finds him to be overly eccentric and a troublemaker, essentially. But he's still willing to bring him along, which indicates that either Sylvester is involved with this whole situation further than we think. As I said before, we already seen a scene where Sylvester was essentially working to stop Wolf, or at least he was working for them to find information. So it does seem like he's involved in some way with this whole investigation as to who's after Myne. But yeah, after introductions, we end up going to travel to do the spring prayer, which they go to different locations. Myne offers up a prayer to one of these goblets. It turns green, apparently, which they didn't really explain what that was about. I'm assuming it's just green mana for crops. Who knows? But then eventually they take a break at one of these estates that one of these barons is basically living at, or one of these counts of the area, the ones that collects the taxes from the people that gives it back to the church. And that's where we get a little bit of discussion around Myne's chef. They're staying there, obviously, so they're going to eat there, and Myne gets a different set of food on her table than everybody else. And Sylvester really likes the smell of Myne's food, so he's asking for some of it, and she's just going to eat. So as Myne is digging in, Sylvester's obviously unhappy, and Ferdinand has to clarify to her, look, I think you want your food. And she's like, oh, well, I'll give you half of it. And he's like, wait, only half? And she's like, so wait, you want to have all of a commoner's food? And she accepts half after that. And this turns into kind of an interesting conversation, because I really like how it's almost as if Myne's the one that has to explain everything to Sylvester, which makes sense to me. Sylvester is a blue robe. It's not as if he's like into merchants and stuff like that. So maybe he hasn't had any kind of dealings like Myne has with merchants. So she sort of has to, it's almost as if she's kind of sidestepping, directly telling him no, but at the same time acknowledging how they typically handle merchants, because it's obviously something I've never really thought about. Yes, technically, if a noble goes out to a merchant and says, I want this product, would they be able to say no? A commoner would not be able to say no to the noble. So it kind of hints as if there's a system in play to prevent stuff like that from being exploited, which, again, like I said, I don't know necessarily they've ever gone out of their way to fully explain, but at the same time makes perfect sense. It would make sense that they would have to have some sort of moral code, or so to speak, something that prevents merchants from just having to give to every noble that comes to them. So when Sylvester says, let's talk about trading our chefs, and she's like, well, look, I can't do that because they're being borrowed from somewhere else, which is not a lie. They're from a restaurant that, they're going to be putting together. And he's like, well, let me talk to the person in charge. I'll talk to them. She's like, well, you can't do that because a commoner's not going to be able to say no to you. You can't just do that. But she's like, but they are going to have a restaurant, which you should become a patron to, which he agrees to. So like I said, it's cool because it's a little bit of insight into how, again, like a noble should really handle themselves with commoners and merchants when you can't necessarily say no to a noble. A noble standing is much higher than a commoner. It makes sense that there'd be things in place to prevent you from just exploiting everything. Following this, they have a little bit of fun. They play music. They do some sword play with carts, and then Sylvester gets up there to show off his sword play, which afterwards he decides to tell Myne to praise him more. He's a weird guy. The following day, they travel around more, do more of the prayers, and then eventually they come to another estate where immediately Myne decides to take a break, to which we find out that night they end up getting attacked by bandits. So a group of bandits attack them at night. They thought they were in Cardi's room, and he apparently wakes up, stops one of them, goes and chases after the other one, and apparently both of them decided to end their own lives. So obviously capture was not an option for these bandits, which makes sense to me. In this world, I would assume that it's do or die. You're going to go do this. You're going to go kidnap Myne. If you're captured, die. Because you don't want to leak the information of who hired you. And at the same time, if you're captured, you're probably dead anyways. There has been a lot of emphasis in this world to the Order of the Nobles, and to go against the Order of the Nobles is pretty much death. Again, technically with Damiel, he was technically supposed to die, but the other guy that was with Damiel when they put Myne's life in danger, that dude's dead. They don't shy away from executions in that regard. So it's safe to assume that if these kidnappers were caught, who are trying to kidnap this priestess, they're dead. There's some speculations flying around, but they don't really have, again, any idea of who exactly hired them, obviously because they died. So following this, they are starting to head back, and they come near where the carriage is that they're going to be boarding once again, which they come to find out is being attacked by what they assume, once again, is a noble, because there is a god of darkness barrier surrounding it. So as they're approaching, it was funny because Ferdinand just like zooms right ahead, Carriage zooms right ahead, and then Myne's like, get up there, hurry. And of course, poor Damiel's like, hey, I ain't got the man to do that. She's like, well, then use mine. So they start darting forward. And this is the first point in which we have Myne using magic. Now, I don't know. I don't think that they classify the healing spell or prayer that she did before to be a magic, but necessarily using mana directly as a spell towards something. This is supposedly the first time that she's ever done it. But she's trying to get Ferdinand to attack these guys that are rushing up to the carriage, because unfortunately Franz and Rosina is inside this carriage, which I like how they're like, we can't do that. We don't know if they're people of this domain or not. And she's like, I don't care. Fran and Rosina are more important. It definitely does give this indication that Myne is, when it comes to protecting her people, it's like she doesn't care about anything else, which is like kind of scary at the same time as the idea that she's willing to kill anybody as long as her people are safe. Yeah, as she's like starting to go crazy, her eyes start glowing. Sylvester's like, you gotta stop this girl. And she's like, nah, ain't happening. I can't do that, but I can guide her. So he decides to basically tell her how to handle the situation, which is to use her mana in a prayer towards the wind god, which just creates sort of a barrier around it, which pushes away all these people that are coming to attack the carriage. At the same time, they identify where this spell is coming from, and so Sylvester picks up Myne, chucks her over to Ferdinand so that Sylvester and Cardi's can go attack this guy that's creating this barrier. And I like how Ferdinand says, yeah, I kind of knew he was going to do that, so let's create a blessing to give to them before they go out in the combat. So They start doing a prayer. It sends out this thing over to Karst and Sylvester, and they just Karst just decimates this entire area. I like how later on they're like, yeah, apparently we weren't able to figure out who created this barrier because Karst's attack literally turned the entire area to ash, which kind of indicates that, yeah, Myne's blessing spell was a little bit too powerful, which it does also seem like it pretty much drained her. Like, these two situations, plus all of the prayer ceremonies they've been doing, drained Myne. And the last scene we have is Myne getting some medicine from Ferdinand, which she notes the idea that despite the fact that she requested him to make it more tastier, he failed. But additionally, and this was in the Aftercast segment, which I don't know if you guys know, make sure to check the Aftercast segments. They always kind of have, yes, they're typically goofy little segments, but in a lot of cases they kind of explain things. But apparently in this conversation, Ferdinand's reinstilling upon Myne the idea that she needs to be very careful about her magic use. That the only reason that she didn't end up dead by using this magic was because she had all these rings and stuff that were essentially suppressing and focusing her mana. Because if her mana gets loose, again, it's going to end up pouring out of her to the point where her entire body will boil up and then she'll explode. So it's one of those things where, yes, you pulled it off here, but you also almost died. Which again has kind of always been the gray area that Ferdinand's always been sitting in. He knows that she is very useful, she's very powerful, she has a lot of mana, but at the same time, she's also sort of a unstable bomb that can go off at any moment. So he's always having to kind of play in that middle area. I'll allow it because I can't control it, but I'll make sure that I focus it. Keep yourself in check or you'll be dealt with. You are an asset, so you need to be used for good. You can help this domain, so we're going to make sure that we keep focusing you. But yeah, solid episode overall. Interesting introduction to Sylvester. He's a very interesting fellow. Again, like I said, I think he's going to continue to kind of poke and prod at Myne. I really am curious of the significance that's going to be around Sylvester, because like I said, they showed all these little segments where he was working with these guys, which I assume was working with Wolf. So we never really got into what he was doing there, and I'm curious if they will later. The moment that he threw Myne over to Ferdinand and went with Carriage instead to the person creating the barrier, I kind of wondered if he was a mole. There was a side of me that kind of wondered if he manipulated that situation so that he would be the one that went after them, which could still be. If he created a barrier and focused Carriage on the wrong target, he could have saved the person that was behind it. So there is a side of me that wants to trust Sylvester, but there's a side of me that could assume that he could be a bad guy, but we don't know yet. And yeah, I really liked, Myne pretty much schooling Sylvester in the area of how nobles should work with merchants. But anyhow, that's my thoughts on episode 30 of Ascendance of Bookworm. Not quite the big reveals I was hoping we'd get, but still a really action-packed episode. I'm definitely looking forward to more of it. Hope you guys enjoyed this impressions video. If you did, make sure to hit that like button down below and comment. Let me know what you thought of the episode. I definitely love the support and everybody checking out the weekly impressions of this series. It's definitely it's a personal love of mine. I know it's like the most popular show in the world, but I think we're increasing the fandom, which I think is awesome. If you're watching this video and you have not subscribed already, I hope that you'll consider doing it. Additionally, if you want to support our channel more, we have a Patreon link and a tips link in the description below. We definitely appreciate everybody that supports us, and y'all take care.